The proposed revision of the Unitarian Universalist bylaws identifies 6 values centered in love and inseparable from each other. On the first day of the season, the first Sunday of the season, we call to mind the first such value, interdependence. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. We covenant to cherish Earth and all beings by creating and nurturing relationships of care and respect. With humility and reverence, we acknowledge our place in the great web of life, and we work to repair harm and damaged relationships.
Our opening hymn is one that's not familiar to me. I don't know about you. Number 73. Bruce will play it entirely through. Notice there is a repeat of one section, and the words are really weird. So give it a look. 73. One verse only. Spring.
Good morning. I'm Elliot Nassif. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs, and I'm your celebrant this morning.
I'm the Reverend Meredith Garmon, Zir or he, him, interim minister.
Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. Our building is located on land that has been home to various peoples in the last 12,000 years, including at the beginning of European encroachment, the Iowa, Sauk, and Meskwaki. These lands were also once home to the passenger pigeon, extinct since 1914. As we enter this space, the ghosts of humans and other animals past are among us. Let us recommit to understanding the history of the land it occupies and to owning our part in the work of education, reparation, and healing for all species.
Our purpose is to associate ourselves together for the study and practice of morality and religion as interpreted by the growing thought and noblest lives of humanity, hoping thereby to prove helpful one to another and to promote truth, righteousness, and love in the world.
This bond of union is reiterated in our mission to grow ethically and spiritually, serve justly, and love radically.
It is a blessing you were born. It matters what you do. Your experience of the divine is true, and you don't have to go it alone.
Today is the first Sunday of spring. The vernal equinox was at 12:06 p.m. on Tuesday, March 19th. The moon is waxing gibbous and the worm moon will be full tonight.
We are in the middle of Ramadan. The Muslim holy month will continue until Eid al-Fitr on April 9th. And on the Christian calendar, today is the 6th Sunday of Lent, also known as Palm Sunday, commemorating Jesus riding into Jerusalem. Lent lasts one more week until Easter next Sunday.
And on the Jewish calendar, today is Purim, which commemorates the saving of the Jewish people from annihilation at the hands of Haman, an official of the Persian Empire in the 5th century BCE. Haman's plot was foiled by Queen Esther, who, concealing her Jewish identity, persuaded the king to intervene on behalf of the Jews.
A special welcome to our visitors. For those of you on Zoom, thanks for tuning in, and please be sure your mic is muted. And if you're here with children, there is childcare, or feel free to keep them seated with you or utilize our play area in the back.
And newcomers are invited to a UU Curiosity conversation on the first Sunday of every month. So the next one will be April 7th after the service. And please be mindful that some folks here value silence after music to let the experience sink in, so you may wish to silently applaud using sign language, like so.
Our connection circles are small groups that gather to explore the monthly theme and build relationship. It's a key way that we live out our mission to grow ethically and spiritually. If you're not in one, please sign up. It's online, and become part of a group. Our theme for the month of March is generosity, and the April theme is love. Issues of both of those, including the just off the presses issue for April love, are on the table just outside the doors there. Pick one up, even if you're not in a group. It's interesting reading. So we begin after one more announcement.
One more announcement. All right, this is from Doug Opperly, so thank you to him. Do not miss the chance to stop by the church next Saturday, March 30th, between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m., where we'll be hosting the 4th annual Central Iowa Trans Lives Festival, which is a free, all-ages public event at which everyone is welcome. Both levels of the church will be filled with creative work of both youth and adult transgender, non-binary, and gender-diverse Iowans, including 24 artists and craftspeople, more than a dozen live musicians and drag performers, and more than a dozen nonprofit and community organizations sharing their resources. There will be LGBTQ-owned or affirming food trucks too, so come join in the excitement of the church's largest community event of the year. Last year, I believe there were over 700 people that stopped in, and we're expecting it to be even bigger this year, so stop by.
And now, the lighting of our chalice.
Please join in saying the chalice words in your order of service. We light this chalice to kindle the fire of commitment, to spread our beloved faith, proclaim the good news that all are worthy and all are welcome, that God is love and none shall be left behind. May we carry this flame to all we encounter, letting our lives shine with its glow. Our responsive invocation is number 546, celebrating the arrival of spring with a poem by Francis Anderson. The side on my left will begin.
And the side on my right will respond with the indented italicized words.
Through dreary, sodden days, the field sponged upon the graying skies.
And now the sun lies soft as birth again, as if the earth had just begun.
And blossoms on the vines, designed in spring, come out to sing again.
And everywhere the ripening pushes falling leaves apart to free the heart for freshening.
as through the seasons of our years,
becoming often waits the nourishment of tears.
no virtuous act is quite as virtuous from the standpoint of our friend or foe as from our own.
Therefore, we are saved by the final form of love, which is forgiveness.
For our sung invocation, words are in your order of service.
This is our song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and wide. For other lands have sunlight too and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
Good morning. My name is Birch Spick. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs, and I am your faith formation and congregational life coordinator. This morning, our story is a story about a Unitarian, if you knew he was a Unitarian, that might be familiar to some of you. He wrote books such as Christmas Carol. This is about Charles Dickens and his generosity later in life. Charles Dickens was born in England in 1812, a little over 200 years ago. He first earned a living as an assistant in a lawyer's office, then as a newspaper reporter. He was still a young man when he became famous for the funny essays he wrote from his own imagination. At first, no one knew who he was, though, because he used the pseudonym Boz. His essays were so popular that Dickens quickly started publishing stories under his own name. Some of them, such as Oliver Twist, Great Expectations, and A Christmas Carol, are still told in books and movies today. In London, in Dickens' day, many children did not have the chance to go to school. Some lived on the streets and worked or begged for pennies to buy food. Some were so poor that they did not have clothes or shoes to wear to school, never mind paper or pens, ink or books. Charles Dickens himself knew about that sort of poverty. When he was a child, his family was also not well off, and one time his father was put in jail because he owed someone money. That year, Charles was 12. He worked at a shoe polish factory instead of going to school, and when Charles was a father with children of his own, some people started a few special schools in London to educate poor children. Dickens gave some of his money to support these schools. He used to say to the poorest children that they needed a chance to be clean too, and schools should provide warm water for them to wash and take baths. By writing stories and sometimes charging money to tell his stories out loud, Dickens earned plenty of money. He shared his earnings to help provide food, housing, education, and hospitals for people who could not afford them. He also believed that people who read his stories might discover more about the needs of others. They might be inspired to help others and work to change society for the better. By 1865, Charles had written more novels, including David Copperfield, which told some of the story of his own life. Then Charles, his friend Ellen Ternan, and Ellen's mother were all hurt in a big train accident. He helped some of the passengers escape from the wreckage, and he lived only 5 more years to the day after that event. Charles was not the only person of his time who cared about children or the poor, but he played a special role. His books influenced politicians, the wealthy, and all readers who had the means and care to help. He helped make the world a better place, and his stories still teach us today. We will sing our children out to their class now with the song printed in your order of service.
Go in joy, go in peace to meet the day. With open hearts embrace like wonders. We will guide you, we will love you on your way.
Good morning. Do you love to bake and cook? Are you into hosting parties? Do you enjoy attending parties and getting to know others? I have just the thing for you. Oh wait, I forgot to change my hat. It's food fair time. My name's Elaine Imlau, she, her, hers, and once again, I'm asking for your help. April 27th and 28th is the date of our annual food fair fundraiser, Fellowship, Food, and Funds, our biggest fundraiser of the year. People offer food items for auction or host events involving food. Auction items can be anything from appetizers to desserts. Events can be as simple as your everyday home-cooked meal, or let your imagination soar with a special theme, decor, or costumes. It can be picnic on paper plates in a park, or fancy fare on fine china. Don't have space in your house? Team up with a friend who does, or take it outside, or host it at church. This won't happen without your offerings. Submissions are due only 2 weeks away from tomorrow, Monday, April 8th, so get on it right away. For more information, ideas, and the submission form, pick up this flyer form from Sandy Simmons or Vicki Scott at the food fair table. If you're an old hat at the food fair, you can take this one. Scan the QR code and it will take you right to the FFF 24 page on the church website. And remember, submissions are due when? Thank you.
My name is Ellen Taylor. I'm a pastoral care associate. Our church is a community of memory and hope, a community of hands and hearts, a community for sharing laughter and tears and bearing witness to one another as we journey through sorrows and joys. Sometimes we do this in group gatherings, and sometimes you just need one person to hear and to hold with you whatever you might be going through. Your pastoral care team is here to help you process any significant transition. If you'd like to do that, please speak to me or another member of the pastoral care team, or email pastoralcareteam@ucdsm.org. And for more collectively bearing witness to one another's journeys today, we share the memorial service for Jacob Cruzy, son of Alan and Amanda Cruzy, and brother of Keon, will be Friday, March 29th at the Isles Westover Chapel on Hickman Road. Visitation is from 2 to 3, with the service at 3 p.m. The family is deeply appreciative of the outpouring of love from this community. Member and staff person Birch Spick will attend the clinical pastoral education program at Unity Point Methodist this summer in preparation for their ministerial internship in Denver this fall. This will be a full-time intensive program, and to prepare that for their last day as a staff person with us will be Sunday, May 12th. They will honor the code of ethics of their professional organizations, which asks staff and congregants to observe a fallow year of no contact after a staff person leaves, so that their relationships may have room to grow beyond that of staff and congregant. They look forward to seeing you when they lead service on May 12th, and to discovering how their relationship with the church may look in 2025 and beyond. Let us now share together the names of anyone we know who could use some special care and attention. You may call the names out loud or type them into the chat. As we share these names, may the love of this community hold them all.
Dear source of healing and wholeness, we call by many names. Our hearts are with the Cruz family. Our well wishes to Birch as they depart, prepare to. And may the names we have spoken be held in love. We seek to be instruments of peace, vehicles for justice, for others and for ourselves. We take heart from encouraging signs. This week, the U.S. administration announced new rules to tighten limits on automobile exhaust. Brazil doubled the size of its project to release anti-dengue mosquitoes to fight that disease. India has begun building a clean energy wind and solar plant that will be 5 times the size of Paris, and in 5 years could be generating enough power for 16 million homes. Santa Clara, California gives open-ended, no-strings-attached stipends to tenants struggling to pay rent. The program's proven effective for keeping renters in their homes and beneficial to the community as well. Nonprofits are heroically protecting abortion access in states that have passed restrictions. They've initiated court challenges, raised funds for travel and accommodation, and found creative workarounds. The European Union last week reached consensus on legislation mandating companies with over 1,000 workers maintain environmental and human rights criteria within their supply chains. So many good people are doing such good work, and we are called to encourage and engage in good work, even as we face all the world's pain, steadfast in our mission to be people of love in the midst of harm, people of kindness and empathy in the midst of cynicism and narcissism, people building hope and meaning in the midst of despair and nihilism. Today, we hold in compassionate awareness Haiti, where criminal gangs patrol the capital streets, vigilante justice approved by the police, while the nation's resigned prime minister watches from Puerto Rico. Russia, where electors re-elected Vladimir Putin as president this week, despite the fact the names of opponents of the incumbent were not allowed to appear on the ballot. El Salvador, where President Nayib Bukele won a second term in February, yet civil liberties have been suspended and up to 2% of the adult population imprisoned, many with no charges. And Iran, where the March 1st election of the Parliament and Assembly of Experts yielded the lowest voter turnout rate since 1979. Israel, where calls for the resignation of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu grow. Our own country, as November's presidential election looms, now 7 months away. Mindful of this world of pain and of love, of tragedy and of beauty, let us bring compassion to our every moment. Let us be voices of justice and peace in everything we say and everything we do.
May the light of our community shine on the broken places of the world, and may we not look away when we are needed. May we confront what is cruel, heal what is broken, and delight in what is good. We light 3 candles, one for the joys and sorrows shared aloud, one for those shared in writing, and one for those held silently among us. For all these, let us now observe a minute of silence.
The reading is from psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett's book, How Emotions Are Made. Dr. Barrett tells this story. Back when I was in graduate school, a guy in my psychology program asked me out on a date. I didn't know him very well and was reluctant to go because honestly, I wasn't particularly attracted to him, but I had been cooped up too long in the lab that day, so I agreed. As we sat together in a coffee shop, to my surprise, I felt my face flush several times as we spoke. My stomach fluttered and I had started having trouble concentrating. Okay, I realized I was wrong. I'm clearly attracted to him. We parted an hour later, after I agreed to go out with him again, and I headed home intrigued. I walked into my apartment, dropped my keys on the floor, threw up, and spent the next 7 days in bed with the flu. For Dr. Barrett, this is an illustration of how we create emotions by interpreting our bodily states. In this case, the initial interpretation was overwritten with the strong evidence that her bodily state was not, after all, attraction, but the onset of flu. Usually, we have no reason to second-guess our initial interpretation. Dr. Barrett writes, "An emotion is your brain's creation of what your bodily sensation means in relation to what is going on around you in the world. In every waking moment, your brain uses past experience, organized as concepts, to guide your actions and give your sensations meaning. When the concepts involved are emotion concepts, your brain constructs instances of emotion. If a swarm of buzzing bees is squeezing underneath your front door while your heart is pounding in your chest, your brain's prior knowledge of stinging insects gives meaning to the sensations from your body and to the sights, sounds, smells, and other sensations from the world, simulating the swarm, the door, and an instance of fear. The exact same bodily sensations in another context, like watching a fascinating film about the hidden lives of bees, might construct an instance of excitement. Emotions are not reactions to the world. You are not a passive receiver of sensory input, but an active constructor of your emotions. With concepts, your brain makes meaning of sensation, and sometimes that meaning is an emotion. We come now to the offering. Our Faith in Action partners this year are Free Store, which helps provide household items to families recovering from domestic violence and other traumas, and the Iowa Trans Mutual Aid Fund, which supports trans and gender diverse Iowans as they access gender affirming care. We need institutions committed to cultivating affirmation and promotion of the inherent dignity and worth of all. Offer then what you can with words and wallet to affirm and promote worth and dignity by affirming and promoting this congregation. In gratitude, then, we give, for in gratitude we receive.
4 weeks ago in the sermon called Believing, Really Believing, and Talking to Your Car, I mentioned that psychology professor Lisa Feldman Barrett argues that emotions are constructed. There are, she says, two main biological continua. There's the pleasant to unpleasant continuum, and there's the high arousal to low arousal continuum. For low arousal and pleasant, think of blissful calm. For high arousal and pleasant, think of something really fun and exciting. For high arousal and unpleasant, think of being very scared or anxious. And for low arousal and unpleasant, think of being bored. The rich and subtle texture of our emotional lives is then a matter of using learned concepts to interpret our biological states in socially recognized ways. Today, I wanted to go back to that earlier point and say a bit more about that. Our emotions are a huge part of what we are. What are they? Where do they come from? What do they mean? What are we to do with them? Consider, for example, a feeling that you might have had, though you didn't have a name for it. Lisa Feldman Barrett describes it. Imagine the feeling of reaching into a bag of potato chips and discovering that the previous chip you ate was the last one. You feel disappointed that the bag is empty, and yet relieved that you won't be ingesting any more calories. You feel slightly guilty that you ate the entire bag, and yet hungry for another chip. So a mix of feelings, disappointment yet relief, a hint of guilt yet desire for more. Dr. Barrett gives this made-up emotion a name. She calls it chiplessness. What makes an emotion is that we learn to interpret our body states with some category. We use those categories to interpret other people's feelings as well as our own. So the categories constitute a social reality. If you have feelings of love, well, you wouldn't know that feeling was love if you didn't have lots of examples from other people. So chiplessness becomes a real emotion to just the extent that it becomes a social reality, that we learn from each other to understand our body states with that category. The empty potato chip bag is the paradigm, but the emotion could apply to other cases. Anytime you're enjoying something that comes to an end and you're disappointed and relieved and a little guilty because you think maybe you've been enjoying it more than you should, and you're desirous for more at the same time, that's chiplessness. If you've ridden the roller coaster in a given amusement park hundreds of times and you get there one day and the ride is closed for repairs, you're disappointed and yet also a bit relieved because you feel a little bit guilty about the way you've been a touch over-enthusiastic about this ride, and yet there's still a part of you that did want to ride it, so you're feeling chipless. Or you come to the end of the last episode of a series you've been binge watching, and you're relieved that you got all the way through it, yet at the same time sorry that it's over, and you suspect maybe spending all that time on this show may not have been the best use of your time, and yet you hope that there's going to be another season. You've got that chipless feeling. If you interpret your experience with this category a few times, it won't be long before you are adept at it. And now it's a real emotion, as real as happiness, sadness, anger, or fear. You might be thinking this new concoction is surely a mix of more elemental emotions. The feeling that something is bittersweet is a combination of bitterness and sweetness. The feeling of awe, says the Oxford Dictionary, is a feeling of reverential respect mixed with fear or wonder. Even supposedly opposite feelings can be mixed, like happiness and sadness at the same time. If you saw the 1997 Roberto Benigni film, Life is Beautiful, in which a father tries to keep his child's spirits up while they are in a concentration camp, then you probably got a strong dose of happiness and sadness at the same time. The masters of literature evoke the various mixing of emotions as their stock in trade, as a 1960 New Yorker column by John Updike about witnessing the baseball great Ted Williams's last at-bat. Updike wrote, "No other player visible to my generation has concentrated within himself so much of the sport's poignance, has so assiduously refined his natural skills, has so constantly brought to the plate that intensity of competence that crowds the throat with joy." Emotions can certainly be mixed, but let's examine this idea that mixtures are ultimately made up of elemental primary emotions. The supposed primary emotions are generally identified with some lists such as fear, anger, sadness, happiness, and disgust. Those are the 5 internal characters inside the psyche of 11-year-old Riley in the 2015 Pixar movie Inside Out. When I'm encouraging people to identify their emotions and separate the emotion from judgment and evaluation, I start with what I say are the basics: mad, sad, glad, and scared. How are you feeling, I might ask. And I might hear, I feel wronged or neglected or cheated or abandoned or betrayed or let down. Those are judgments. If you say you feel disappointed, that's getting closer, but in a given context, it's likely to be tinged with judgment about another person's conduct rather than your own emotion. So to be helpful in identifying the emotion, I might ask, are you mad, sad, glad, or scared? And from there, we can begin learning how to fine-tune our identification of emotions. Under the general rubric of sadness, one might discern discouragement, distraughtness, resignation, helplessness, hopelessness, misery, despair, grief, sorrow, or anguish, each of which is distinct. Anger might be fine-tuned as annoyance, frustration, exasperation, argumentativeness, bitterness, vengefulness, or fury. Gladness might be fine-tuned as sensory pleasure, rejoicing, compassionate joy, amusement, relief, pride, wonder, excitement, ecstasy, and so on. Psychologist Paul Ekman did a number of cross-cultural studies in which he showed photos of facial expressions like or. And Ekman's work led him to the conclusion that there were 6 emotions that were innate and universally recognized in all cultures: mad, sad, glad, scared, plus disgust and also surprise. Another source lists 8 primary emotions, leaving out sadness, but including distress and anxiety, as well as interest. Despite ongoing ambiguity about the precise list of what the primary emotions supposedly are, various writers confidently declare that primary emotions are universal and innate. Turns out, according to Lisa Feldman Barrett and a growing number of researchers whose evidence I find pretty persuasive, that none are universal or innate. None. What is universal and innate in the area of feelings are those 2 axes, low arousal to high arousal and pleasant to unpleasant. That's the biology that is indeed basic to all vertebrates and possibly to many invertebrates. Everything else, it turns out, is cultural and learned. We had to learn how to interpret ourselves and each other as angry or scared. We had to learn, we learned it basically the way we learned a few minutes ago to interpret ourselves sometimes as chipless. The classic facial expression that Ekman thought were cross-culturally universal: surprise, anger, disgust, happiness, etc. Those are stereotypes, and they are problematic in the way that stereotypes generally are. In the attempt to abstract or summarize, they misrepresent the complex reality. Ekman's photos were not of people who were feeling the emotions supposedly pictured. They were people who were told to show an assigned emotion, so they displayed the stereotype. In reality, people who are angry have all kinds of facial configurations. Maybe sometimes you quietly seethe. Other times you might be screaming and shouting, which would look more like an open mouth than a very tight-lipped closed mouth. If professional actors made the faces like the ones pictured above, we would think that their character was either intentionally being campy or that they were ham actors. In real life, if you saw someone with stereotypical surprise face or the fear face or any of the stereotyped ones, you would be more likely to think they were mocking the feeling than that they were authentically feeling it. And we'll explore more along those lines after our interlude. Careful studies measuring facial muscle movements find that there is no facial configuration, no part of a facial configuration that all angry people display, nor is there any part of a facial configuration that only angry people display. Sometimes those pursed tight lips are just someone thinking hard about something. When we dig a little into Paul Ekman's methodology, we learn that when he showed his pictures, like the ones that display the stereotyped emotions to people in remote cultures, he didn't just say, "What is this person feeling?" He presented the question as multiple choice. Choose the word that best matches the face. And the options were limited to Ekman's 6. They might not have been the emotions that in that culture were the most central or primary. Members of a culture in which chiplessness was central and primary to their way of understanding themselves, if there were such a culture, would not have found chipless an available option. Moreover, in cultures that didn't speak English, Ekman had to use translations of the English words, even if close matches to the English word didn't exist in the other language. The Kung people of the Kalahari don't have any word for fear. They certainly feel the heightened adrenaline from an immediately imposed danger, and they will flee from it, and we would characterize them as afraid, but that's not how they think of themselves. And since part of the experience of fear is recognizing this is fear, they don't have the experience that we have. Utka Eskimos have no concept of anger. The Tahitians have no concept of sadness. Maybe that's because they're in Tahiti. You might think, as one writer put it, that a smile is recognized in all cultures as a signal of happiness and social welcome. Actually, no. Here's what Dr. Barrett says about that. For one thing, happiness is usually the only pleasant emotion category that's tested using the basic emotion method, so it's trivial for subjects to distinguish it from the negative categories. And consider this fun fact. The historical record implies that ancient Romans did not smile spontaneously when they were happy. The word smile doesn't exist in Latin. Smiling was an invention of the Middle Ages, and broad, toothy-mouthed smiles became popular only in the 18th century as dentistry became more accessible and affordable. Classics scholar Mary Beard adds, this is not to say that Romans never curled up the edges of their mouths in a formation that would look to us much like a smile. Of course they did, but such curling did not mean very much in the range of significant social and cultural gestures in Rome. Conversely, other gestures, which would mean little to us, were much more heavily freighted with significance. Thus, Barrett concludes, so far as I know, no emotion concept is universal. But even if one were, universality itself does not automatically imply a perceiver-independent reality. Take, for example, magical little people, called nymphs in ancient Greece, leprechauns in Ireland, brownies in Scotland, fairies in Celtic legend, menehune in native Hawaiian folklore, trolls in Scandinavia, Aziza in Africa, aglulik in Inuit culture, mimis in Aboriginal Australia, Shin from China, Kami from Japan. Even if magical little people were part of every single human culture on Earth, that wouldn't mean they were a perceiver-independent reality like atoms and rocks and trees. We're not saying emotions aren't real, we're saying they're cultural. And they are very real, just like money is very real, which also isn't a perceiver-independent reality, but depends on the social agreement of a given society. Other than those two axes of arousal and pleasantness, everything else in the area of emotion depends on having the concept, and concepts are learned features of a culture. Not all cultures have the emotion concepts of English-speaking cultures. Instead, they may have others. Of course, cultures sometimes borrow from each other, the way that English speakers have borrowed. Examples I've mentioned before, Schadenfreude and Weltschmerz from the German, ennui from the French. Here are 17 others we might consider appropriating. From Italian, fiero, the enjoyment felt when you've met a challenge that stretched your capabilities. From Yiddish, naches, feelings of pride in the accomplishment or something, sometimes just the existence of your offspring or mentees. From the Dutch, gezellig and voorpret. Gezellig is a specific experience of comfort with friends. Voorpret is pleasure felt about an event before the event takes place, a delighted anticipation. From the Greek, stenochoria, a feeling of doom, hopelessness, suffocation, and constriction. From the Korean, jeong, happiness, specifically from attachment to a close friend. From the Ilongot of the Philippines, liget, exuberant aggression involving intense focus, passion, and energy while pursuing a hazardous challenge with a group of people. It sounds similar to the recently developed emotion concept in our culture that we call putting on your game face. Also, Filipino, gigil, the urge to hug or squeeze something that is unbearably adorable. From Norwegian, forelsket, an intense joy of falling in love. From the Danish, hygge, a certain feeling of close friendship. From the Russian, toka, which is spiritual anguish. From the Portuguese, saudade, a strong spiritual longing. From the Spanish, pena ajena, sadness over another person's loss, discomfort or embarrassment for someone else's behalf. From the Japanese, arigata mewaku, the feeling that someone has done you a favor that you didn't want from them and which may have caused difficulty for you, but you're required to be grateful anyway. Doesn't that sound very Japanese? The culture is its concepts, and the concepts for the way we feel, plus the physiological sensations we're interpreting, are the emotion. Also, I love this one from the Japanese. Age atore is the feeling that you just had a haircut and now look worse. Other cultures mix and match emotion categories differently. For the Ifaluk of Micronesia, there's fago, which depending on context could mean love or empathy or pity, sadness or compassion. And from the Czech, litost is torment over one's own misery combined with the desire for revenge. We might want to revive twitterpated from the 1942 Disney movie Bambi. Twitterpated, like chipless, is a made-up emotion, but they're all made up. And that is Barrett's point. All emotions are made up by members of a given culture. Your emotional life is cultural habits of interpretation of and projection onto your awareness of your body states. As we work through the meaning of this new understanding of emotion, it's going to have wide implications. It's going to have legal implications, like we can't tell what remorse is. Remorse is a culture product, and some cultures have very different expressions of it, or don't have the concept at all. So the notion of remorsefulness in criminal sentencing is problematic, and yet juries decide sentences in part on whether they think the defendant feels remorse. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev of Chechnya, the surviving bomber of the 2013 Boston Marathon bomb, was sentenced to death in 2015. Tsarnaev spoke words of apology, but when jurors looked at his face, all they saw was a stone-faced stare. If Lisa Feldman Barrett is right, then jurors do not and cannot detect remorse or any other emotion in anybody ever. Neither can I, and neither can you, she says. That might be someone who is a remorseless killer, but a stone-faced stare might also mean that someone is stoically accepting defeat, which is in fact what Chechen culture prescribes for someone in Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's situation. There's solid reason to believe Dzhokhar Tsarnaev committed the acts of which he was accused. There is no basis for saying he was remorseless or that he wasn't. There's a lot more to say about how to understand emotions, but let me leave you with two takeaways. One, learn more emotion concepts. Emotional granularity, having a higher vocabulary of emotion words, is healthy for you. Yes, they are all cultural concepts, but it's good to have a large toolbox of cultural concepts. The ability to speak and think with greater precision is a brain efficiency for navigating your reality. And we humans have created a fantastically complex social reality for ourselves. So your brain needs all the efficiency it can get. And second, whatever you're feeling, you don't have to take it so seriously. And particularly, you don't have to take seriously your interpretation of what you think other people are feeling. Talk to the people. Ask them what they're feeling. Don't assume. They'll make up a story, but at least it's the better story than the one you're making up about them. Emotions are social, so be sociable with them and about them. And good luck. It's a rough terrain out there. Blessed be. Amen.
Our last hymn, number 83, Winds Be Still. Winds be still, storm clouds pass and silence comes. right and true, so we may join our songs in new songs that become full symphony.
Please join me in saying our chalice extinguishing words in your bulletin. As we extinguish this chalice, we carry in our hearts that it matters not how much we have, but how generously we give. That it matters not how much we know, but how well we live. That it matters not what we believe, unless it guides us toward love.
And may the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which reconciles all who are separated, and which puts to flight all fears, be in us and among us, now and always. Go in peace.